Welcome to the show. Chris Graham and Rod Mullins going to break down this weekend in NASCAR, the Bank of America Charlotte Roval 400. And the win goes to Kyle Larson, who punches his ticket to the next round, the round of eight. But Rod, let's start with what to me feels like the bigger news here. Alex Bowman finished the race in a position where he would have been in the playoff round of eight. But
hmm
something happened after the race, and he got disqualified, and he's no longer in the playoffs now. An appeal is underway. We'll see how that goes. But wow, this is huge. Tell everybody what happened there.
Well, this is one of those things. I know that sometimes when I file a story pretty quick after a race, and they're kind of like the unofficial winner, so to speak. We're told that. This was one of those things that kind of caught me off guard because I actually had one of my former students when I was teaching email me and message me last night and said, "Have you gotten anything about Alex Bowman being eliminated and Joey Logano making it into the round of eight?" And I said, "No, but I'm going to double check." And I went back on, and then sooner or later, I got an email, a revised story from Charlotte Motor Speedway saying that, yes, this had happened and that they had weighed him, talking about Alex Bowman's 48 car. They had weighed the car. And once they had weighed the car, they found out that it was too light. And then we got the explanation from Brian Moran, who is like the managing director of NASCAR. And he said that, hey, they had this situation of where they rolled the car up on top of the scales. Once they did that, they found out it was too light. So they decided to add fuel to it, make sure all the fluids and everything else were in it and were, like a normal race situation, like it is for pre inspection. That's where it should have been. I mean, they should have caught this if it was something like this in pre-inspection. But it was still light once all this stuff took place. Now he didn't win the race, and therefore, if he'd won the race, then I could see him being penalized and punished out of it if that was the case. But I think he finished 18th out of this, and now you know Rick Hendrick and company, I think, are going to appeal this. They're going to take it before and tell them, say, hey, let's find out a little bit more about the situation, how this happened.
Yeah, I'm wondering, is the Rick Hendrick team saying anything about how that could possibly be?
Well, they've not really said anything formally. They said that they were going to look at the possibility of an appeal. That's what I'd heard as of this morning, that they were looking at the possibility of an appeal. But here's what they will probably end up doing. One, they will go and Rick Hendrick will get there and say, and the crew chief will get there and say, hey, look, it made it through inspection. It had to go through inspection the first time around. What did they do to go and affect this to change it right before the end of the race, knowing full well that they would go through inspection once again? The second thing is Rick Hendrick is going to pull out all the stops. If he's going to appeal this, he is going to ask that that same car be put on an independent set of scales to find out what's wrong. Then they're going to call into question if the possibility those NASCAR digital scales could be in an error. If they're in an error, then in that case, Rick Hendrick will end up winning that case. They'll probably, go ahead and let it. But then that kind of deflates everything because guess what? Joey Logano's in the playoffs now. And Alex Bowman has been kicked out by this. So I don't know if Joey Logano is celebrating right yet or if he says it's a little too early to be celebrating. This thing could come around as karma for somebody else before it's all said and done. But definitely not a good look for the Hendrick team right now as they're going into the final round of eight.
So from your story, you talked about Brad Moran, the managing director of
Yeah.
NASCAR. He says that cars are allowed a 0.5% weight break for usage of fluids. That's about 17 pounds. So whatever difference is between allowable weight and where Bowman's car apparently is, I
Right.
haven't seen anywhere where NASCAR has said it's exactly this many pounds, but it's over 17 pounds.
Right.
I mean, I guess we can see where if you're, a few pounds under that, you're going to be slightly more aerodynamic, a
hmm
slightly faster. As you said, he didn't win the race; he finished 18th. Um, but among the things that's fascinating to me about this is that we don't have at least I haven't seen anywhere where we're being told this is how much underweight he was, this is how much it would impact his speed, this is why we're doing this. It seems very vague right now, at least what we're hearing publicly.
It's about as vague as it's about as vague as understanding, and I hate to kind of go back on this and stuff and use this as an example. It's about as vague as wondering what in the heck is the reason why the crowds are down at UVA football games. I have read that. I mean, I've been, trying to figure that out myself, but let's say it this way. The Roval wasn't exactly a sellout. We'll put it that way. It was not a big sellout, but it was still in a very interesting race. But yeah, we're still kind of left in this vagueness zone, so to speak, as to what's expected out of this whole thing. I was surprised. I was really surprised. This is something that, like I said earlier, eliminate somebody if they win. I can see that eliminating somebody out of the points and qualifying for the playoffs that way. But when you finish 18th, I would think, okay, what about a slap? What about a slap on the hand in this one and just say, hey, look, we're not going to knock you out of the playoffs or anything, but we're just going to make it a little bit tougher for you to make it to the playoffs. I could have seen a fine in there, a small fine or something of that nature, but this pretty much takes the cake. This hurts you because Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, and also William Byron were all hoping there were going to be four cars of the Hendrick four that was going to be out of those spots in the eight that was going to make the playoffs. And then that was going to be left to Christopher Bell and your others down through there. Now it's not the case. Now you've got three, and now you're left scratching your head. What are they going to be looking for coming around for next week when they go to their next venue on the circuit? How are they going to be before all is said and done by the time they get down to Phoenix for the championship? What are they going to be looking for? Everybody's going to have to be on pins and needles and mind their P's and Q's.
Brad Moran mentioned expedited review. I didn't see anything specific about that, but obviously,
Mm-hmm.
as you mentioned, I mean, if Bowman were to win his appeal, he'd be back into playoffs presumably, and then Joey Logano would be back out of the playoffs. They need to get this resolved as soon as possible,
Yep.
just to have no competition advantage or disadvantage for those guys. I say that to say, have you seen or heard anything about okay expedited appeal, but anything specific about when that might come down?
This expedited appeal is going to take place probably within about the next 2 or 3 days. They will decide something at least by Wednesday, or at least get something rolling at least by Wednesday, because that is traditionally when like the announcement is made of whether or not somebody's going to be penalized or somebody had been penalized following the race because of certain infractions. So I expect this at least by Tuesday or Wednesday, that they're working right now and they're working behind the scenes to try to come up with some kind of an answer as to what they're going to be doing, what they're going to be facing when it comes time for this coming weekend at their next race.
So we've broken that down. That's a fascinating story. Now to the main part of the race and the folks who finished at or near the top. And the winner we mentioned earlier, Kyle Larson. He's had a solid season. He's won two playoff races now, one in each round of the playoffs. As it is the case, it seems like when Kyle Larson wins a race, it's usually not a close win. He's usually pretty dominant. He was dominant in this one as well.
Yeah, he was dominant in the final stages, leading 62 of the last 82 laps of this thing. And, I was just really impressed with how he was handling things, pressure from, other drivers like Christopher Bell, Shane Van Gisbergen, all these others that, ended up having a little bit of trouble for the race. But, he just seemed to dominate. I mean, it just like he had picked up from where he left off at Bristol, and he just continued to dominate. And he said, too, it's really the first time he hasn't been close to the cut line. Now, that was one of the things that has kind of worried him in the past and so forth about being close to the cut line during the playoffs. So it was kind of nice to have a stress-free weekend, according to what he said. He had spent some time on the simulator this past week. That's something that he rarely does, but he spent some time on the simulator this past weekend, and he credited that to helping him get a rhythm till he could be able to compete and also finish the Roval race.
Sure sounds like if that's a help as it sounds like it was,
Mm-hmm.
You ought to do that more often, not just Kyle, but other guys as well. I mean,
Mhm.
maybe get those reps in more often during the week.
Yeah, I think so. But one of these guys that probably should have had this race, at least at one point, won a stage, but then ended up kind of fading back and then having to regroup and rush to the front was Tyler Reddick. Tyler Reddick won the first stage of this race. Everything looked good for him, but then, a wreck in turn 7, he sustained some damage to his car. You got to give credit to the 2311 team for getting him back in order and getting him back out on the track. They worked hard to repair the vehicle, but he at least regained some competitiveness for the final stage. But he did say, he said, "I thought I was going to flip." He thought he was going to flip when he hit that row of bumps, that they were that right there. And then all the cars kind of collided and came together. But he said that his team did an amazing job of keeping the car in the race, and they kept on fighting. And here's the one thing I think that paid off for him. It was the call by Billy Scott, the crew chief, to go and bring him in for 4 fresh tires to get him through the race. And that proved to be crucial in the final laps because it helped him climb back through the field, and he stayed in contention, and he made the cut for the round of 8.
We'll talk more about 2311 in the last segment of the podcast here, involved with the lawsuit that's
Mm-hmm.
still ongoing with NASCAR from 2311 and Front Row Motorsports. So Reddick, we were talking about, so the other playoff guys. Talk about the rest of that playoff field. We know some of the spots. We've already talked about some of the guys.
Mm-hmm.
Who else emerged from this into the round of 8?
Well, Christopher Bell was one that locked himself into it. William Byron, of course, they're into it. Chase Elliott, he's looking good right now at making the field. He's still not a guaranteed fit, but at least they're making it down. They've at least been able to secure some spots to where they feel like they're maybe not going to have to race pressure wise when they go next week. I believe it's to Las Vegas is where they're going. So they've got some pressure on them right now about some of these drivers do, especially I think the Elliots, and then also you have your William Byron, who has kind of been up and down as of late. I think he's one that's going to be, you're going to have to watch him. Also, if Joey Logano is into this thing, that could change the whole concept of this round of 8. If he is in the playoffs, Joey Logano is going to go for broke. He's going to try to do anything he can to make sure he's there for the round of 4 at the cutoff point before they get to when they get to Phoenix. But looking at some of the others here, you had some of these guys that came in, Christopher Bell, like we mentioned already with that. But here's the ones that fell off. These were eliminated out of the playoffs, okay? You had Austin Cindric, Daniel Suarez, and Chase Briscoe. Austin Cindric was running a pretty good race yesterday, but he just could not keep his car near the front where he needed to be at to gain those points. Daniel Suarez had trouble early on, never quite recovered after that, and he was gone before all was said and done. And Chase Briscoe, the last gasp of Stewart Haas Racing to try to at least make a sizable contribution into the playoffs as they start going into the round of 8. He saw his chances go out the window yesterday as well. But Ryan Blaney, he's kind of holding on there and stuff. He did well. I thought Ryan Blaney kind of held tough in there. But you also had at the checkered flag yesterday, AJ Allmendinger, not in the playoffs, but he finished 6th. He was the winner last year of the race, followed by Van Gisbergen, who came back. He had some problems, but managed to come back and finish 7th. You had Logano finishing 8th. Bubba Wallace, he had bumped some people during the race yesterday and still managed to get back to around an 8th or a 9th place finish. And then you have Blaney and Reddick rounding that out. So those at the checkered flag, it was a mixed bag. Some of them have made the playoffs. Some of them have come close to the playoffs, and then others have missed the playoffs completely.